I found this unusual object in an old castle. It was tucked away in a side room filled with miscellaneous items, mostly kitchen-related. It has a wooden body and a few unusual-looking handles on top. Does anyone know what this device was used for? This object is a Victorian-era rotary knife cleaner, also known as Kent's patent knife cleaner, named after its inventor, George Kent. It was developed in the mid-19th century as a labor-saving device for quickly polishing and maintaining steel knives, a necessity in an era before stainless steel became standard. The machine consists of a hand-cranked wooden drum mounted on a cast-iron frame. Knives were inserted into the slots on the top of the drum, and an abrasive powder was poured inside. As the user turned the crank, internal leather and bristle brushes would rotate against the blade surfaces, polishing them while also removing rust and tarnish. George Kent patented the first version of this device in 1844, and over the next few decades, the design was improved and expanded. By the late 1800s, his company offered models that could clean up to 10 knives at once, and the product was widely exported. Competing brands also emerged in the United States and Europe. These machines were commonly used in wealthy households, hotels, and gentlemen's clubs, anywhere large volumes of knives required regular cleaning. I got this from a free toolbox when the neighbors moved, and it's the only tool I couldn't identify. It looks like a pair of heavy-duty pliers or cutters with a drill bit attached to it. Does anyone know what this tool was used for? What you found is a pair of safety wire pliers, also known as wire twisting pliers. This tool is designed to tightly twist soft metal wire, typically stainless steel, to secure bolts and fasteners in place. It's commonly used in aviation, motorsports, and other industries where vibration can cause threaded parts to loosen over time. To use the tool, you start by threading the wire through holes in the bolts or nuts that need to be secured, then bring the ends together. Those ends are clamped between the serrated jaws of the pliers, and the handles are locked in place using the built-in latch. After that, you pull the spiral rod. Thanks to the helical grooves inside the handles and an internal bearing, the jaws begin to spin, twisting the wire into a tight, even spiral. The design dates back to the 1940s and was widely adopted by military aircraft mechanics during and after World War II. It hasn't changed much since, a testament to how effective and reliable the tool is. Even today, safety wire pliers are a standard item in aircraft maintenance kits and racing pit garages alike. My father-in-law bought this cast-iron slot machine in the 1950s. When you insert a penny or dime into the red slot, the reels spin and realign, but there's no payout. The coin just drops into the base. We haven't been able to find another one like it online. Does anyone know what this machine is? This unusual cast-iron device is a 5-reel poker trade stimulator, most likely manufactured by the Columbia Manufacturing Company around the year 1891. At first glance, it resembles a slot machine, but it was actually designed as a countertop amusement device commonly found in cigar shops, bars, and hotel lobbies during the late 19th century. Customers would insert a coin, usually a penny or a nickel, and pull a lever to spin 5 drums, each displaying playing cards. If the reels landed on a winning poker hand, the player could receive a small prize, like a cigar or a drink from the shopkeeper. Because there were no direct cash payouts, these machines were often used in places where gambling was otherwise restricted. The entire mechanism was purely mechanical, operating with gears, springs, and levers, no electricity involved. I found these glass display vials in my parents' garage. They were apparently left by the previous owner, who was a chemist. The labels say Theodow and lime sulfur solution, and both mention Dow Chemical Company. These are vintage Dow Chemical display capsules from the mid-20th century. They contain samples of Theodow and lime sulfur solution, both agricultural fungicides once produced by Dow. The label "for display only" indicates that they weren't meant for actual use but were created for marketing or educational purposes. Dow produced these sealed glass capsules as part of demonstration kits for sales reps, agricultural fairs, or university outreach programs. The idea was to let farmers or clients see the actual chemical product, its color and form, without having to handle it. In that era, handing out a tiny sample in a clean, sealed capsule was considered a modern, trustworthy way to promote a product. I found these velvet cases with some kind of metal contraption inside, mixed in with antique ashtrays and old kitchen gadgets at a local thrift store. The outside had faded lettering that looked Chinese. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a pair of vintage charcoal hand warmers, small metal cases designed to hold a slow-burning fuel stick, usually made from compressed charcoal. These devices were used to keep your hands warm in cold weather. Once the stick was lit and began to smolder, it would be placed inside the case, releasing a gentle, steady heat for several hours. Many were lined with insulation and covered in velvet, making them more comfortable to carry in a coat pocket or muff. Solid fuel hand warmers like these were especially common from the early to mid-20th century. They were used by hunters, commuters, soldiers, and skiers alike. Before heading outside, you'd light the stick, wait for it to glow, then seal it inside the case to safely carry the warmth with you. Many of these warmers were manufactured in East Asia and exported around the world during the 1950s to the 1970s. I found this strange device among my grandfather's belongings. It has a dial on the side that moves a display inside, and there's a row of small bulbs or lenses at the top, though they don't seem to reflect or emit any light. Does anyone know what this could have been used for? What you found is a Gaussian sextomat, a handheld photographic light meter from the 1950s. This device was used by photographers and cinematographers to measure ambient light and determine the correct exposure settings for their camera. It worked entirely without batteries, using a selenium cell to generate a small electric current when exposed to light. That current moved the needle on the display, giving the user a reading they could use to dial in the proper aperture and shutter speed. The sextomat was a major innovation of its time. Developed in post-war Germany, it combined precise engineering with practical features, like a built-in blind that allowed switching between incident and reflected light modes. Its compact design included a top-mounted scale and a mechanical dial on the side for calculating exposure. This model proved to be so successful that it sold over 1 million units worldwide and helped define the look of mid-century professional photography gear. I came across this metal handle embedded in the street while walking through the historic center of Querétaro, Mexico. It's firmly attached to the ground, doesn't move when pulled, and there are several of them in a row along the pavement. They look old and worn, definitely not part of any modern drainage system. What you found is an old horse tethering ring, a type of iron loop that riders and carriage drivers once used to secure their horses while they ran errands or made deliveries. These rings were usually mounted into stone or concrete and built strong enough to hold a full-sized horse in place. Tethering rings like this were once a common sight in cities around the world, including colonial towns like Querétaro. You'd often find them outside shops, inns, and courthouses. In some American cities, installing these rings was actually required by law. For example, in 1907, Portland, Oregon passed an ordinance mandating that iron rings be embedded every 25 feet along new curbs so delivery horses could be safely tied down. I bought this wooden container at an estate sale, but the owner wasn't there to explain what it was. It caught my eye because of the octagonal shape, the decorative latch, and rings on the sides, and the interior lined with what looks like printed Asian script. Does anyone know what this item might have been used for? What you've bought is a traditional East Asian container used to protect valuable manuscripts, royal decrees, family records, or hand-painted artworks. These boxes were often made from lacquered or polished wood, sometimes decorated with brass hardware, and lined on the inside with printed paper or silk. This particular design is most closely associated with Korea or China, where such boxes were used throughout the 19th century by scholars, officials, and artists. In Korea, it is called a durumari ham, and it often featured side rings and a latch, so the lid could be secured with a cord for transport. The printed paper lining you see inside could be pages from a book or newspaper, a common practice in both Korean and Chinese craftsmanship. I found this small chisel-like tool, and I can't figure out what it's for. It has a flathead screw to change the tip, and the shaft spins freely. The shape is compact, and it looks like it's meant to be used with one hand. What you found is a leather carving swivel knife, a specialized tool used in leatherworking to create smooth cuts and intricate curves. It's held like a pencil, with your finger resting in the U-shaped yoke at the top, and as you pull it through dampened leather, the blade pivots to follow the motion of your hand. This type of knife first gained popularity in the early 20th century, especially among saddle makers and Western leather artisans. Over time, it became a standard tool in leathercraft, used for everything from cowboy saddles and belts to decorative purses and journal covers. Even today, the swivel knife remains an essential tool for leatherworkers, hobbyists, and artists. For anyone interested in traditional leather carving, it's one of the first tools you learn to master. I found this small, ornate item at a yard sale in Madera, California. One of the utensils has sterling engraved on it, along with some other words I couldn't make out. It feels fairly heavy and has a lot of intricate detailing. For size reference, it's about as tall and wide as a 2-ounce soda bottle, and the metal feels a bit like iron. What you've found is a Victorian pickle caster, a decorative serving jar used in the 19th century to present pickled fruits and vegetables at the dining table. These pieces typically consisted of a glass jar nestled inside an ornate silver-plated frame, topped with a matching lid and accompanied by a small set of tongs or a fork for serving. Pickle casters became especially popular in the United States during the 1870s and 1880s, at a time when formal dining and elaborate table settings were seen as a mark of sophistication and prosperity. They weren't just used for cucumbers. Victorian hosts would serve all kinds of pickled delicacies: onions, cauliflower, cherries, even pickled peaches. American silver companies like Meriden Britannia, Reed and Barton, and James Tufts produced hundreds of designs, often pairing their frames with vibrant art glass inserts, sometimes decorated with enamel flowers or gold accents. The most elaborate models featured claw-footed stands, Gothic or Japanese-inspired arches, and sculpted finials shaped like birds, cherubs, or pineapples. I found this brass object that screws into the wall. It sort of looks like a bottle opener, but the hole seems too small for a beer or wine bottle. Does anyone know what this thing is? This brass object is part of a vintage wall-mounted corkscrew, specifically a rack and pinion wine opener. These devices were widely used in bars, hotels, and even pharmacies during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They were fixed to a wall or counter and allowed the user to uncork bottles with just a simple pull of a lever. The design typically involved a steel worm that screwed into the cork and a gear mechanism that then pulled it out smoothly. Some versions even allowed the cork to drop out automatically afterwards. We found this unusual object in the attic while helping a relative move. It's at least 50 years old and has a pump on top, but there's no tube inside the bottle. Does anyone know what this device was used for? What you found is a vintage liquor pump decanter, a mid-century tabletop beverage dispenser designed for serving spirits with style. When you want to pour a drink, you press the top knob, which forces air into the sealed glass base and builds up pressure inside. That pressure pushes the liquor up through a hidden dip tube and out through a small spout, delivering a shot straight into your glass. The pump mechanism never touches the liquor itself, only air does, which helps keep the system cleaner and more hygienic. Pump decanters became especially popular in the United States during the 1940s and 1950s, when home cocktail culture was booming. After the end of Prohibition, Americans began entertaining more at home, and barware companies introduced all kinds of clever gadgets for the modern host. One of the most iconic was the merry-go-round bar, set by the Park Sherman Company in Illinois. Over time, the rubber gaskets and valves inside these pumps tend to dry out, which is why many vintage pump decanters no longer work unless they're repaired or restored. In the last video, I asked you to guess what this unusual tool with a plastic handle and 2 metal ends might be used for. Everyone had great guesses, and many of you got it right. This item is a brake spring tool, used when working on drum brakes to remove or install the tension springs safely and efficiently. Thank you to everyone who participated and shared your guesses. A special shout out to Mickey Tikitavi for being the first to correctly identify it. Alright, it's time for another mystery item. Take a look at this wooden object. It's about 14 inches long and has a curved shape with a hooked end. What do you think it's used for? Leave your guesses in the comments and I'll reveal the answer in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Your support motivates me to create more videos. See you next time.